We step into the world of medieval medicine, and a woman whose knowledge of life and death is about to be put to the ultimate test. Picture yourself in a small, dimly lit cottage, where the smell of herbs and wood smoke mingles in the air. Clara, a midwife, with a reputation as strong as her resolve, is about to enter a scene where fear and uncertainty hang thick in the air. As you step through the door, you feel the weight of the moment press against your chest. The atmosphere is dense, suffocating, as though the room itself knows what's coming. You probably won't survive this, but hey, don't worry, this is just a tale, right? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'd love to see where our little bedtime journey is taking us tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Clara, as always, is busy with her work in the village. It's the middle of the night, and she's been called to assist with a birth. Her heart races as she gathers her things, a leather satchel filled with herbs, old wives' remedies, and instruments she's used 1,000 times. Yet tonight feels different. Maybe it's the shadows creeping across the floor, or the fact that she's been hearing rumors about sickness spreading from the distant lands where Eleanor's husband has just returned. Clara can't shake the sense that tonight's birth will be unlike the others. When she arrives at Eleanor's cottage, she's greeted with the strained silence of a house on edge. The flickering candlelight dances on the walls, casting ominous shadows. Eleanor's husband, a tall, lean figure, stands by the fire eyes, avoiding Clara's. It's strange, Clara thinks. She's always been trusted in this village. No secrets, no lies. But there's something off in the air tonight. Eleanor, pale and sweating, sits on her bed, gripping the edge of the blanket. Her face is tight with pain, but Clara's gaze shifts to her trembling hands. Something feels wrong deeper than just the usual labor pains. The moment she steps into the room, Clara feels the weight of fear in the air, as if the room itself is holding its breath. You step closer to Eleanor, the warm glow of the candlelight making her face seem almost translucent. She winces in pain as a contraction hits, but her eyes, their glassy, distant look, strike you with unease. You move to her side, gently placing your hand on her shoulder, your voice soft. "How are you feeling, Eleanor?" Her lips tremble, and she manages a strained smile. "It's been hours, Clara. I don't know if I can do this anymore." You nod, your mind racing. There's something in her tone, in the way she clutches the bed sheets, that makes you feel like this birth won't go as smoothly as the others. It's not the pain. It's something else, something unspoken. You glance at her husband, standing by the hearth, his eyes averted. His usual confidence has faltered, and you can't help but wonder, what is he hiding? As you prepare to check on Eleanor, you notice something odd. The room smells faintly of something you can't quite place, a bitterness mixed with the earthy scent of herbs and sweat. You breathe it in. It's familiar, but you can't quite identify it. Historians still argue whether midwives in medieval times had any real understanding of how diseases spread, or if they were simply at the mercy of folklore and superstition. One thing is clear, though. Clara isn't just a healer. She's a woman who's come to understand the deep connection between sickness and birth. And something here feels wrong. You can feel the tension rising as you examine Eleanor. Her skin is too pale, almost grayish under the candlelight, and her hands are clammy cold. This isn't normal. A quick look at the signs, faint rashes on her arms and chest, leads you to a sudden realization. It's not just the labor. It's a fever, an infection. Your heart skips a beat as the weight of the situation sinks in. You can't be sure, but this looks like a disease that has been sweeping through the land. A sickness that's known to spread rapidly and kill within days. Eleanor's suffering is no longer just the pain of childbirth. It's a fight against something far more dangerous. You feel a chill creep up your spine as you turn to Eleanor's husband, your voice barely above a whisper. Has anyone else been ill? Your family, the people from the village. His eyes meet yours for the first time, and you catch a flicker of guilt before he looks away again. I've just returned from a trip, he says quickly, his voice too sharp, too defensive. Nothing out of the ordinary, but you know better. You know the land he traveled through. You know the rumors of the sickness spreading from the northern regions, carried by those who unknowingly bring it home. You can already feel the invisible threads of infection winding through this house, wrapping around you, pulling you into something far worse than a simple birth. As Eleanor's contractions grow stronger, the room becomes suffocating. The shadows seem to close in on you, and your thoughts swirl like a tempest. You try to keep calm, focusing on the birth, on helping her. But with every moment that passes, the fear creeps deeper into your chest. Historians still debate whether medieval midwives understood the concept of germs and infections, or if they were simply guided by intuition and trial and error. You've never studied the causes of disease the way a physician would, but you've seen enough in your years to know this. This isn't just bad luck. This is within her, but it's hard to ignore. Every shift in Eleanor's breath, every wince of pain, feels like a ticking clock, a countdown she has no control over. The contractions come in waves, but this time they're too fast, too sharp, and Eleanor's face twists in agony with each one. Clara steadies her, trying to keep her focus, but her thoughts are a blur of suspicion, fear, and frustration. The infection, whatever it is, has already begun to take hold, and now Clara must make a choice that could cost her everything. You reach for your leather pouch, feeling the familiar weight of the herbs and salves inside. They've helped many women in labor, soothed many pains, but this is different. You don't have the right medicine for this. The infection could spread in the blink of an eye, taking them, both the mother and the baby, away from this world, and you might not survive it either. Eleanor grips your arm, her nails digging into your skin as another contraction hits. Her breathing is ragged too fast, and her body is trembling with fever. Clara, you know that in this moment there is no turning back. You could stop the birth now, try to save Eleanor's life. But what about the child if you don't continue? If you don't act quickly, it could die too. Clara Eleanor whispers between gasps, her voice weak. Please, I can't. I don't know if I can keep going. You glance down at her, your mind whirling. There's so much more at stake than just the birth now. Historians argue whether midwives like you were ever really equipped to handle medical crises like these, or whether they were just caught up in the fragile web of life and death, never quite sure when a healing touch might save, and when it might lead to more loss. You've never been so unsure of yourself in all your years of helping women. Still, you push on. You take a deep breath and gather your courage. You know the path ahead will be perilous, but you also know that you've faced challenges before, just never one quite like this. The baby's head begins to crown, and a strangled cry of pain escapes Eleanor's lips. It's the moment of truth. You brace yourself, using all your experience to guide the child into the world. But the sickening weight of fear makes every second feel like an eternity. You've seen births go wrong before, complications, hemorrhaging, sepsis, but never in such an environment. Never when the very air itself seems thick with the disease that could rob them both of their lives. You manage to pull the baby from Eleanor, its tiny body pale and weak. It's not crying, just lying there, almost lifeless in your hands. For a moment, you simply stare at it, your heart pounding. You can't tell if it's alive. The baby's skin is cold to the touch, and its chest barely rises. You quickly wipe it clean, rubbing its back, willing it to breathe. The fear in Eleanor's eyes mirrors your own. You look down at her, And for the first time in what feels like forever, you realize there is nothing you can do. The baby's breath is shallow, but it's there. The tiniest, faintest sign of life. You place the newborn in Eleanor's trembling arms, but you can't shake the gnawing sense of dread. The fever is high now, and Eleanor is barely conscious. Her breath is ragged, her face flushed with the sickness taking over. You can feel it in the room, this suffocating atmosphere, thick with illness, and the knowledge that there's nothing more you can do. You've done your best, but it's not enough. Clara looks up at the window. The moonlight casts long shadows across the floor, as if the night itself is watching. In that moment, she wonders if she could have done more. If she should have known earlier what Eleanor's husband brought back with him. Should she have quarantined them, kept them away from the village? Would it have made a difference? Would anyone have listened? The weight of the choices she made presses down on her chest, threatening to break her. Historians still argue whether midwives truly had the power to influence life or death during such times, or if they were simply at the mercy of fate. You wonder now whether it was fate or something darker at work here. You had the knowledge, the experience, but sometimes that's just not enough. Eleanor's breathing slows, and Clara knows she's slipping away. The baby, too, is barely clinging to life. This is what Clara feared, the reason she never wanted to take on this responsibility, because sometimes, despite all the care and effort, death still claims its prize. As the minutes tick by, Clara remains by Eleanor's side, helpless. The only thing left to do is wait. The room feels colder now, even though the fire is still burning, crackling with faint warmth in the corner. The shadows seem to stretch farther, casting eerie shapes across the walls, as if they too are drawn to the weight of what is unfolding. You can feel the air grow thicker, as though the very house knows something is wrong. You've seen it before, the stillness, the quiet surrender of a life slipping away. But never like this. Never in such a suffocating silence, with a life so fragile in your hands. You watch Eleanor's breathing slow, each shallow gasp growing fainter as the seconds drag on. Her body has become limp, her grip on the baby weakening. You know she's gone before you even touch her wrist to check. The fever has ravaged her, and there's nothing left to save. You place a hand gently on her forehead, feeling the heat that has consumed her. It's a cruel irony, this fever, a disease that slowly burns away the will to live, leaving only the shell behind. The baby, still nestled against her, lets out the faintest sound, a tiny cry that barely breaks the silence. You look down at it, unsure whether the sound is from a newborn's instinct to cry or something more sinister. The weight of the room presses against you, heavy with the knowledge that no matter what you do, nothing will bring Eleanor back. Your eyes wander back to the doorway. Eleanor's husband hasn't moved, hasn't spoken since the birth began. He's standing in the same place, his back against the wall, his eyes wide, staring at the scene unfolding in front of him. His expression is unreadable, but you can see it in his stance, the guilt. The knowledge that this is in part his fault. Clara clenches her fists. He might not say it aloud, but she can sense it in the air. His actions, the trips, the late-night dealings, his failure to recognize the symptoms before bringing the illness back, have led to this. She can feel her own anger rising. She wants to scream at him, demand answers, but she knows there's no point. He too is a victim in this tangled web of fate. The village, the people, they'll blame her. She's the one who couldn't save them. The one who was supposed to be able to prevent such suffering. But tonight she realizes that no amount of knowledge, no matter how many herbs or remedies she's learned over the years, can change the course of something like this. In the face of illness, in the face of a fever that rots a body from the inside out, all she is helpless. A healer with no cure. Historians have long debated whether midwives were simply vessels for delivering life, or whether they bore the crushing weight of the death that sometimes followed. In Clara's case, she knows the answer now. Midwives are both saviors and the ones who must watch it slip away. She kneels down beside Eleanor's bed, watching the lifeless form of the woman she tried so desperately to save. Her mind is numb with grief, and for the first time in years, Clara feels utterly useless. She could have prevented this. Couldn't she have if she had acted sooner, if she had known what the infection really was? A baby's cry cuts through her spiraling thoughts. It's weak, barely audible, but it's there. The newborn is still alive. Clara's heart stutters as she looks down at the tiny form in her arms. This child, this innocent, is the last piece of Eleanor, the last thread of the family she's just lost. The weight of the life in her arms is overwhelming. The baby's cries grow louder, more insistent. Clara takes a deep breath, swallowing down the knot in her throat. She can't fail this child too. She cannot allow this little one to succumb to the same fate as its mother. You remember the stories midwives have always been expected to bring new life into the world. But no one ever tells you about the cost. The toll it takes to watch death come so silently, so unexpectedly. And yet, here you are caught between two lives. Eleanor's already gone, and the baby's still fighting to stay alive. But you know that this fight is only just beginning. The fever that claimed Eleanor could still claim the child, and there's nothing in your bag of remedies that can fight it. Nothing that can stop it. You glance up at the fire where the flames flicker in the hearth. You wish you could just close your eyes, forget it all. But you can't. You still have a job to do. And even though it feels like the universe has already made its decision, you'll be damned if you don't give everything you have to try and change it. With the baby still crying softly in your arms, you rise to your feet. Eleanor's husband hasn't moved, still staring blankly into the distance. He's a shell of the man he was when he entered this room. Now he's nothing more than a bystander watching the inevitable unfold. Historians argue whether it's worse to be caught between life and death or to face the consequences of living. Clara doesn't know. She just knows that she's facing something that could ruin her, and no one will ever understand the weight she carries, no matter how many times she tries to explain. You turn your attention back to the baby in your arms. It's alive, still breathing, still struggling for a chance. And despite everything, despite the fear, Clara knows she can't let this child go. Not without a fight. You shift the baby in your arms, its fragile body still trembling from the shock of its first breath. The room seems to close in around you as you stare at its small, pale face. It's the image of innocence, helplessness. But in that moment, Clara feels the heavy weight of responsibility pressing down on her chest. This child, this tiny life, holds the promise of a future, but also the looming threat of the disease that claimed its mother. She can't help but wonder, how much time does it have? How much time does she have? As the baby's cries grow fainter, Clara carefully adjusts the swaddle around its fragile form. The fever that burned through Eleanor's body is now creeping through the air, slowly infiltrating her own thoughts. She tries to block it out, focusing on the tiny movements of the child's chest. It's still breathing, still fighting for life, but she knows the infection could spread just as easily as it had in Eleanor. Time is running out. The silence in the room is deafening. Eleanor's lifeless body lies in front of you, a stark reminder of the inevitable. Clara can feel the pull of guilt in her gut, the nagging sensation that somehow she could have done more, could have prevented this tragedy. But it's too late for those thoughts now. Historians often debate whether midwives of the medieval era truly understood the danger of infection, or if they were simply at the mercy of fate. Clara knows she's at the mercy of something beyond her control. This disease, it spreads faster than anything she's seen before. There are no remedies for it, not the way she knows them, not the way she could ever stop it. You glance up at the window where the moonlight flickers through the curtain. The soft light casts a pale glow across the room, casting long, distorted shadows on the walls. The fire in the hearth is dwindling, but there's no comfort in its warmth. You feel cold, detached like a spectator in your own life. The events of the last few hours seem to blur together a terrifying whirlwind of panic, fear, and helplessness. The baby in your arms cries again, its voice raw and weak. It pulls you back into the moment. You close your eyes, trying to steady your breath, trying to focus. You can't afford to fall apart now. This child needs you. You have to help it survive, no matter what. You take a slow, steadying breath as you sit down on the edge of the bed. The baby's eyes wide and unblinking meet yours, as if it understands the gravity of the situation. Clara's hands tremble as she gently rocks the baby back and forth. The feeling of its tiny heartbeat beneath your palm is all you need to remind yourself of why you're here. To save life, to protect those who can't protect themselves. But how much longer can you keep this child safe? You start pulling herbs from your pouch, something to calm the fever, something to ease the baby's suffering. But your mind is clouded. There's no clear path forward. You know the truth: the disease has already taken hold of the village, and it's spreading faster than anyone could have anticipated. You could save this baby, but what about the others? What about yourself? The weight of the village's fate bears down on you. Historians argue whether midwives in Clara's time were as aware of the risks of contagion as we are today, or if they simply followed the ancient practices passed down through the generations. In Clara's case, there's no certainty. No amount of knowledge can stop the disease now. The only thing she can do is hope for a miracle. Hope that this child is strong enough to survive the fever, the disease, the fate that was handed to it the moment it was born. You look down at the baby again. It's still crying, still struggling for breath, but at least it's fighting. And as you rock it gently, you realize that this moment, the moment you've been preparing for your whole life, isn't about saving everyone. It's about holding on, about doing everything in your power to keep this one tiny life from slipping away. Eleanor's husband finally moves, stepping closer to the bed. His voice is almost a whisper, full of shame and regret. Will she survive? You can't bring yourself to answer immediately. There's too much uncertainty in your heart, too much you don't know. You can feel the weight of his gaze on you, and it only adds to the tension in the room. He knows the disease is spreading. He knows what this means. Finally, you speak, your voice barely audible. I don't know. The words hang in the air, thick with their meaning. But I'll do everything I can. You glance at him, and his eyes meet yours with an intensity that makes your stomach twist. You both know that no matter how hard you try, no matter how much you hope the disease may already have sealed their fate, but still you hold the baby close, determined not to let go. The silence stretches on, broken only by the baby's faint cries. The hours blur together in a haze of dim light, muted sounds, and the stifling, oppressive silence that has settled over the room. Clara can feel every minute slipping away as she watches the baby, its small body racked with shivers, unable to find comfort in the makeshift blanket she's wrapped it in. The cries have tapered off, leaving only the softest whimpers like a plea for something she cannot give. She tries to soothe it, rocking gently, but each cry pierces her heart, a reminder that time is running out. Eleanor's husband stands a few feet away, his face drawn and pale. He's silent now, his earlier agitation gone, replaced by a numbness that Clara recognizes all too well. There's nothing he can do either. Nothing anyone can do. The weight of the helplessness in the room presses against Clara like a physical force. She knows she should focus on the baby, but her thoughts keep drifting back to Eleanor, to the lifeless body that now lies under a rough woolen blanket on the bed. The woman she had tried so desperately to save. The woman who is now beyond saving. Clara lets out a shaky breath, forcing herself to focus. She can't afford to lose herself to despair. Not now, not when she has a chance to save this baby. She looks down at it, its small chest rising and falling weak, but steady. Its life is a fragile thread, and Clara is the one holding on to it. Historians still argue whether midwives in the medieval era were truly prepared to handle the kind of outbreaks Clara is facing. Some claim that women like Clara, with their hands-on knowledge of childbirth and healing, were better equipped than most, while others suggest they were woefully unprepared for the full scale of the disease and its spread. But Clara knows this much, her role. Her responsibility isn't just to help bring life into the world. It's to fight with every ounce of strength she has, to protect the fragile lives that she is entrusted with. You notice the faintest twitch from the baby in your arms. A small, instinctual movement, something that brings a flicker of hope. For the briefest moment, Clara allows herself to breathe. It's alive. It's still fighting. But as the night stretches on, she realizes just how much more there is to be done, how much more she must endure. Eleanor's husband moves toward her, his eyes still hollow with guilt. "Is there anything I can do?" he asks quietly, his voice barely more than a whisper. His words seem almost mechanical, like he's not sure whether they're meant to offer help or to absolve himself of responsibility. Clara shakes her head, her voice tight. "There's nothing you can do. The disease is already here. The damage is done." She doesn't meet his eyes, not because she's angry, but because she can't bear to see the look on his face. It's the look of a man who has just realized that he is not in control, that the things he has done, his ignorance, his mistakes, have led to this. He may not have meant for it to happen, but it doesn't change the truth. The sickness has spread, and now it's too late to undo what's been done. A strange, cold silence falls over the room again. Eleanor's husband stands motionless, the weight of Clara's words settling on him like an anchor. She wishes she could offer him some comfort, some sign that everything will be okay. But there's no comfort to be found in this place. No easy answers. Only the hard, ugly reality of what they're facing. The baby's survival now feels like the last glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak world. Clara knows that the only way forward is to act, to do everything she can to protect this fragile life. And so she turns back to the baby in her arms, checking its temperature once again, feeling its tiny body shiver under the wool blanket. The fever hasn't broken. In fact, it's getting worse. The baby's skin, already pale, is beginning to feel colder, its breathing more labored. Clara wraps it more tightly in the blanket, but she knows it's not enough. The fever will kill it too if she can't stop it. In the distance, Clara hears the soft murmur of voices outside the room. She knows the villagers must be talking about the sickness by now. Word spreads fast in a small community, especially when it's about something as dangerous as this. But Clara doesn't want to think about the village right now. She doesn't want to think about the consequences of what's happening here. What she wants, what she needs, is a solution. A way to save this child. A way to stop the disease from taking more lives. As the hours pass, Clara works tirelessly, using every remedy she can think of. Herbal infusions, cooling cloths, anything she can do to fight the fever. She has no idea if it will work, but she doesn't stop. She can't stop. The child, so small, so fragile, has fought this far, and Clara will not let it slip away without a fight. The baby cries again weakly, its tiny body trembling against Clara's chest. Her heart aches, knowing that this may be the last time she hears it. The cry, soft as it is, gives her a sense of connection to the little life she's trying so desperately to save. She holds the baby close, feeling the warmth of its tiny body against hers, wishing she could give it the strength it needs to survive. But as the night drags on, Clara knows the odds are stacked against her. She's already seen one life slip away tonight, and the thought of losing another, of failing this innocent child, feels like a weight too heavy to bear. Historians still argue whether midwives of Clara's time were truly prepared for the kind of epidemics that swept through villages in those years, or if they were helpless bystanders to the diseases they couldn't control. Clara knows one thing for certain. In this moment, she is no bystander. She is the one holding on the one fighting for survival. And if she can't win this battle, she'll carry the weight of the loss with her forever. The room grows colder still, the fire in the hearth flickering, as though it too is trying to fight against the creeping chill of death. Clara doesn't know how much longer she can keep going, but she knows she can't stop. The baby's cries have subsided now, leaving only soft whimpers barely audible. She checks its skin once again. It's cooler than it was before. The fever hasn't broken. The child is slipping away. With each passing minute, her heart feels heavier. The silence in the room is suffocating, broken only by the sound of her breath and the occasional rustle of the baby's blanket as she tries to reposition it, trying desperately to keep it warm, keep it alive. Her fingers tremble as she strokes its small forehead, silently begging for a miracle that she knows is unlikely to come. Eleanor's husband hasn't moved from his place by the fire, his eyes glued to the floor as if he's waiting for the inevitable. His guilt hangs in the air, like a fog, a silent presence that both Clara and he are too afraid to acknowledge. He must know by now that this situation is far worse than anyone could have anticipated. But Clara's attention is divided. She's no longer just concerned with Eleanor's husband or the death that's creeping through the room. She's focused entirely on the child, this little life, that somehow found its way into her hands. Her responsibility for it has become her sole purpose now. She can't bear the thought of it succumbing to the same fate as its mother. Historians often argue whether midwives of Clara's era ever had any real ability to influence the outcome of their patients' lives, especially when faced with epidemics and diseases far beyond their understanding. Some claim that midwives were more intuitive than doctors of the time, while others believe they were simply at the mercy of fate. Clara doesn't know what to believe anymore. She only knows what she feels in this moment, that her skills, her knowledge have come up against something so much bigger than herself. Clara watches as the baby's small chest rises and falls in shallow, uneven breaths. The struggle for air is evident now, and her heart twists in her chest. The baby's body is too weak, too frail to fight against the fever that rages within it. She presses a cloth to its forehead, her hands shaking as she tries to cool its burning skin. She can't help but think about the village, about the people who will inevitably hear of Eleanor's death, of the sickness that has claimed her. Word will spread. It always does. And when they find out that Clara was involved, that she couldn't save them, the whispers will begin. She knows that. They'll blame her. They always do. No matter how much she tries, no matter how hard she works, no one ever seems to remember the good. All they remember is the death, the failure. But tonight she doesn't care. She can't afford to care about the village's judgment. There's only the baby, only this moment. Everything else has faded into the background. She's all that's left for this child. Her hands are still trembling as she wraps the baby more tightly in the blanket. She doesn't want to let go. She can't. The child is a fragile thread between this world and the next. And Clara feels as though she is the only thing holding it here, keeping it tethered to life. But the baby's breaths are getting more labored now. Clara's heart races in her chest, each beat like the ticking of a clock, counting down to the inevitable. She can't keep it alive forever. She knows that. But she refuses to let it go without a fight. If this child has to leave the world, it won't be because she didn't try everything. Please, Clara whispers to the baby, her voice barely audible. Please fight. Don't give up. Not yet. As if it understands, the baby gives one final weak cry, a cry that shakes Clara to her core. But it's not enough. The baby's small body gives one last shudder, and then falls still. For a moment, Clara is frozen, unable to comprehend what has just happened. She can feel the weight of the silence in the room, the stillness that has claimed the baby. She holds it close, her hands numb with the weight of loss. And then she feels it, the tears. They come without warning, the floodgates opening. She sobs, letting the grief pour out for Eleanor, for the baby, for the village that she has failed. Historians still argue whether midwives of this time ever truly understood the power of life and death, or if they were simply subject to the whims of fate, carrying the responsibility for a world they couldn't control. Clara knows the answer now. She understands that sometimes, no matter how much you try, life slips away. You can fight all you want, but you cannot control the outcome. Sometimes, all you can do is witness it. She wipes her eyes, her heart heavy with the weight of it all. This is not the way she imagined her life would end, not like this in a room filled with death. The baby is gone. Eleanor is gone. And all that's left is the quiet and the memory of a life she couldn't save. Clara closes her eyes and takes a deep breath. This is the part of her work no one talks about, the part where you hold the weight of the world in your hands and watch it slip away. She never prepared for this, and now it's over. The room feels colder now, emptier. The weight of the stillness is suffocating the absence of sound, somehow louder than the cries of the baby that once filled the air. Clara remains kneeling by the bed, her hands still clutching the lifeless form of the infant. She feels the chill of the child's body against her skin, and yet she cannot bring herself to let it go. It's as if releasing it would be an acceptance of failure, an acknowledgement of something she cannot bear to face. Eleanor's husband is still standing in the corner, watching her in silence. His eyes flicker from the baby in Clara's arms to his wife's body and back again. He's paralyzed with guilt, unable to speak, unable to move. Clara knows the feeling all too well. He's trapped in the same helplessness that's been eating away at her from the moment the first contractions started. Historians still argue whether medieval midwives were simply skilled in assisting births, or if they were something more: doctors, healers, and even mystics who carried the weight of life and death. For Clara, this burden has become unbearable. Tonight, she's faced with the stark reality that no amount of knowledge, no matter how deeply it's rooted in centuries of experience, can stop the inevitable. Not when disease runs rampant, not when fate has already sealed its course. With a quiet sigh, Clara slowly lays the baby down, its fragile body still wrapped in the worn blanket. She moves to Eleanor's side, gently closing the woman's eyes, eyes that once held hope and life, now empty. It's a small act of kindness, but it feels insignificant in the face of the tragedy unfolding around her. She wants to say something to comfort the husband, but the words won't come. They never do in moments like this. There's nothing that can undo the loss, no words to fill the silence, nothing to take away the sting of death that lingers in the room. The minutes tick by like hours. Clara can feel the tension between them, the unspoken questions hanging in the air. Eleanor's husband opens his mouth a few times, but each time he falters, unable to voice the thoughts racing through his mind. Clara knows what he wants to ask, what everyone would ask. Why? Why didn't you save them? Why couldn't you do more? But Clara knows the truth sometimes. there is nothing more you can do. Sometimes the world spins out of control and all you can do is bear witness. And in that quiet space between life and death, you realize how fragile everything really is. As the moments stretch on, Clara feels her legs stiffen from kneeling, her muscles protesting the position. But she doesn't move. She doesn't want to leave them. Doesn't want to face the world beyond these walls where the villagers will soon learn what's happened. Where the whispers will begin. Historians still argue whether midwives truly understood the weight of their role in a community, or whether they were simply caught up in the unrelenting tide of life and death. Clara has always known the weight, but she's never truly understood its depth until now, until she's forced to face the consequences of a life lost and the unbearable truth that she couldn't save them. Eleanor's husband finally speaks, his voice hoarse and cracking. But now, his question is simple, yet it carries the weight of everything. What happens next? How do they move on from this? How does she... Clara doesn't answer right away. The question hangs in the air, thick with sorrow. She feels her breath catch in her throat as she tries to think of a response, but there is none. No words can change what has already happened. I don't know, she says quietly. I don't know what happens next. The truth is, Clara doesn't know. She doesn't know how to face the village tomorrow or the day after that. She doesn't know how to move forward when it feels like the world has stopped. All she can do is stay here in the room with Eleanor and the baby until the weight of what happened settles into her bones, until she can figure out how to breathe again. And so she stays. Eleanor's husband moves closer, kneeling beside her, his face a mask of grief. Clara looks at him, her eyes tired but steady. She doesn't speak. There's nothing more to say. She places a hand on his shoulder, offering what little comfort she can. But she knows that this moment will stay with them both for the rest of their lives. It will never go away. Historians have written countless stories of midwives, of women who lived and died by the very life they helped bring into the world. But Clara's story is different. Hers is a story of loss, of a battle fought that she could never win, of lives lost to a disease no one could stop. Clara takes a final steadying breath. It's time to leave the room, to face the consequences of the choices made. But as she rises to her feet, the weight of everything she's witnessed tonight doesn't leave her. It stays with her, pulling her down like a stone in the pit of her stomach. But for now, there's nothing more she can do. She knows that. And as she walks out of the room, she hears the softest whisper behind her, the faintest cry of the baby that once was. And she knows that this is a loss she will carry with her for the rest of her life. The world outside is still and cold, the faint light of the early morning creeping through the cracks in the window shutters. Clara steps out of the room, her feet moving almost on their own as she walks down the narrow hallway. The stone walls seem to close in around her, the weight of the night pressing against her chest. She feels the lingering warmth of the hearth on her back, but it offers no comfort. All she can think of is the stillness of the room behind her, the two bodies lying there, Eleanor, who had once breathed life into this space, and the child whose heart had fought so briefly, but so fiercely, for its place in the world. Clara reaches the small door at the end of the hall and steps outside, blinking against the gray light of dawn. The cold air stings her face, and she inhales deeply, letting the crispness of it clear her thoughts, if only for a moment. The village is quiet, almost eerily so, as if it too is holding its breath, waiting for something to break the silence. It's the calm before the storm, the moment before the village learns of Eleanor's death, of the sickness, and of Clara's role in it all. The whispers will start soon enough. They always do. She pulls her shawl tighter around her shoulders, her steps slow as she makes her way down the cobblestone path. She doesn't know where she's going. She only knows she can't stay here in this house that now feels like a tomb. The morning light casts long shadows across the narrow street, and Clara can't help but feel as if the very earth is pressing down on her, reminding her of the weight of what has happened. As she walks, she hears the faint murmur of voices in the distance. The village is waking up, going about its morning routines. The smell of fresh bread wafts from the bakery, and Clara sees the figures of women heading to the well. They're so oblivious, so unaware of what has transpired in the house just a few steps away. And yet Clara knows that it's only a matter of time before the news spreads. It always does. Gossip is like a plague in small villages, contagious and insidious, devouring everything in its path. Historians still argue whether midwives like Clara were seen as healers or outcasts, whether they were revered for their skills or feared for their knowledge of life and death. Clara knows the truth. She is neither fully one nor the other. She is just a woman, a midwife, doing the best she can in a world that offers no guarantees. The thought of facing the villagers, of having to explain the unexplainable, makes her stomach churn. She knows what they will say, how they will blame her for Eleanor's death, for the child's death. They won't understand the disease. They won't understand the choices she had to make. To them, it will be simple she failed. And in many ways, she feels like she has. But Clara also knows that there's more to this story than the village will ever understand. There's a darkness here, a sickness that goes beyond the body. She feels it in the pit of her stomach, in the way her thoughts swirl like a storm that she can't quite control. There's no cure for what's happened. There's no magic herb or secret remedy that will make things right. All she can do now is wait and see how the village reacts. Wait to see if they turn on her as they've turned on so many others before. She doesn't realize how far she's walked until she reaches the edge of the village. The fields stretch out before her, the rolling hills shrouded in mist, a peaceful scene that feels completely at odds with the chaos in her mind. The silence of the land is almost deafening, as though the world itself is holding its breath. Clara stands there for a moment, taking in the sight, feeling the cool wind tug at her hair. There's something beautiful about it, something quiet and unyielding, like the life she's tried to build here. But it's slipping away from her now, like sand through her fingers. The villagers will never look at her the same way again. The weight of her failures will follow her wherever she goes. She takes another deep breath, trying to push the heaviness from her chest. There's nothing to do now but face the consequences of her choices. The baby, the disease, Eleanor's death, they're all part of a larger story, one that she can't rewrite no matter how much she wishes she could. As she turns to walk back toward the village, Clara feels the sting of tears in her eyes, but she doesn't let them fall. There's no time for tears now. She has to be strong, even though she feels like she's crumbling inside. The villagers will soon know. They will ask questions, point fingers, and search for someone to blame. And Clara knows that she will be their scapegoat. She will bear the weight of this tragedy, whether she deserves it or not. The price of being a midwife in a world where the boundaries between life and death are so thin. She reaches the village square where a few of the townspeople are starting to gather. The chatter is light, innocent, but Clara knows it won't be long before someone mentions the events of the night before. She can feel the eyes on her as she walks through the crowd, their whispers already starting to swirl. The judgment has begun. Clara's heart races, but she keeps her head high, her gaze steady. The story of the night will be told, and the villagers will draw their conclusions. But Clara knows deep down that the truth is far more complicated than they will ever understand. Historians may never know what it was like to walk in the shoes of a midwife like Clara. The weight of life and death, the never-ending responsibility, and the emotional toll of failing when every instinct tells you to fight. But Clara knows, and that's all that matters now. The sun continues to rise, but the warmth it offers feels distant, like a promise that can't quite be kept. Clara walks through the village square, her steps measured and deliberate. But beneath it all, her heart is pounding, an uncontrollable rhythm that echoes through her chest. The chatter of the villagers fills the air, but it's all a distant murmur fading into the background. She feels the weight of their stares on her, like invisible hands pressing down, pulling her toward the inevitable confrontation. As she passes by familiar faces, the smiles of the townsfolk seem strained, as if they know something she doesn't. The men, the women, all seem to know. She can feel it in the way they look at her, in the way they avert their eyes. The knowledge of what happened, the understanding of Eleanor's death, is spreading like wildfire through the village. Soon, the whispers will turn into accusations. A voice calls her name, breaking her thoughts. It's Judith, the village healer. Judith's eyes are soft with concern, her usually vibrant demeanor subdued. She steps toward Clara, her hands clasped together as though she's about to say something important. Clara, Judith says gently, her voice low. "How are you holding up?" The words are simple, but Clara hears the underlying concern in them. Judith knows. She knows what's coming. They both do. Clara's mouth goes dry, and she forces a smile, one that doesn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine," she says, but it sounds hollow, even to her own ears. Judith raises an eyebrow, sensing the lie, but says nothing. Instead, she looks down at the cobblestones, clearly unsure of how to proceed. "The village is starting to talk," she says softly. "They're not sure what to make of it. The disease? Eleanor? The baby? They're blaming you, Clara. But I don't believe it's your fault. You did what you could." Clara wants to scream, to tell Judith that it's all her fault, that she couldn't save them, that she couldn't stop the disease. But she holds it in. Judith's words are kind, and Clara knows they're meant to soothe, but they feel like a distant echo, like something that doesn't matter in the face of the truth. "I couldn't save them, Judith." Clara says finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I couldn't save Eleanor. I couldn't save the baby. And now the whole village will think it's my fault." Judith reaches out, placing a hand on Clara's arm, her touch warm and comforting. "They don't understand," she says softly. "They never will. But you did what you could. You tried, Clara. You always try." Clara shakes her head, pulling away from Judith's touch. "But it wasn't enough," she says, her voice cracking. "It never is." The silence stretches between them, thick and uncomfortable. Judith looks like she wants to say more, but the words don't come. There's nothing anyone can say now. The truth is, Clara knows what the village will do. They'll point fingers, blame her for the deaths, and make her the scapegoat. It's the way of things. It's how the world works when people are scared, when they can't understand what's happening. They'll need someone to blame, and Clara knows she'll be the one standing in the center of it all. As they stand there, the sound of footsteps breaks the quiet, and Clara turns to see a group of villagers heading toward them. The look on their faces tells Clara everything she needs to know. The gossip has already begun. They've heard Judith murmurs under her breath. The rumors have spread faster than I expected. Clara knows that the moment has come. The villagers are going to demand answers. They'll want to know everything, what happened, why it happened, and why she couldn't stop it. They'll ask her if she failed. And in the back of her mind, Clara knows she will never be able to answer their questions in a way that satisfies them. No matter what she says, no matter how much she explains, the suspicion will remain. The guilt will remain. The group approaches their faces serious, their eyes flicking between Clara and Judith. There's no mistaking the judgment in their expressions, the weight of their questions pressing down on Clara's shoulders like an invisible hand. "Clara, one of the women," Mary says sharply. "We need to know what happened. Why did Eleanor die? Why did the baby?" She trails off as if she can't bring herself to say it, but the question hangs in the air, suffocating. Clara feels the heat rising in her chest, the anger bubbling up. But she holds it in, knowing that it will do no good. They're scared, they're grieving, and they need someone to blame. The truth doesn't matter to them. It never does. I did what I could. Clara says, her voice calm but firm. Eleanor was infected when she came to me. She was sick before she even went into labor. And the baby. Her voice cracks, but she forces herself to continue. The baby didn't survive. Neither did Eleanor. The disease spread too quickly. A murmur runs through the group of villagers, some nodding as if they understand, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Clara knows they won't truly accept her explanation. They won't understand that there was nothing she could do. She was just one woman with limited knowledge and even fewer tools facing a sickness no one could have predicted. But that won't stop them from blaming her. Mary steps forward, her eyes hard. "The disease, how do we know you didn't cause it? You're the one who helped her. You're the one who brought that sickness into our village." Clara's heart skips a beat and she feels a wave of anger flood her chest. "You think I brought it here?" she asks, her voice rising. "I didn't bring this disease. I didn't bring the sickness to this village. It was already here and it was beyond anyone's control." But they're not listening to her anymore. The words fall on deaf ears as the group mutters among themselves, casting judgment, casting blame. Clara knows what's coming. She feels it in the pit of her stomach like a tightening knot. She's already marked as the scapegoat. The village will turn on her. It always happens. As the villagers turn and begin to walk away, Clara feels her knees weaken as though the world is pulling her down. The burden of it all presses against her chest, suffocating her. She stands there for a moment, watching them go, feeling the cold reality of what's to come. The whispers have begun, and there's no way to stop them. The weight of the villagers' stares lingers long after they've gone, an invisible hand pressing down on Clara's chest, making it hard to breathe. She stands motionless in the village square, her eyes following the retreating figures of the townsfolk as they disappear into the winding streets. The whispers haven't just begun. They're already spreading, infecting the very air. In a place like this, where trust is as fragile as a winter frost, once a rumor begins, it grows like wildfire, and soon it will consume everything in its path. Clara feels the sting of their accusations, even though they weren't spoken directly to her. The glances, the judgment in their eyes, she knows they've already made up their minds. To them, she is the one who failed. The midwife who couldn't save Eleanor, the woman who allowed the sickness to spread. It doesn't matter that she did everything she could. The fact is, they don't understand. They can't. A bitter laugh escapes her lips, low and almost humorless. They will never understand. Clara's heart feels like it's sinking, swallowed by the silence of the village. She wants to scream to demand that they see the truth. She wants to tell them that there was no way to stop it, that she wasn't some miracle worker, some god who could save lives with a mere touch. But there's no point in trying. The villagers don't want the truth. They want someone to blame. She's about to turn and head back to her cottage when she feels a gentle hand on her arm. It's Judith stepping closer with a concerned expression on her face. "Clara," she says softly, her voice full of sympathy. "You know they're wrong, right? Clara forces a smile, though it feels brittle. "Do I?" she replies, her voice quiet and distant. "Do I really, Judith? Because right now, it doesn't feel like anyone in this village will ever believe that I did what I could." Judith's grip tightens on her arm, pulling Clara's attention back to her. "They're scared, Clara. They're grieving. They don't know what to do with the pain of losing someone they loved. And it's easier to blame you than to face the fact that there's nothing anyone could have done." Clara meets Judith's eyes, her heart aching with the weight of those words. She knows Judith is trying to offer comfort, but the truth is, there's nothing anyone can say to take away the sting of failure that Clara feels deep inside her. The loss of Eleanor and the baby, it feels like a wound that will never heal, one that will stay with her forever. She nods slowly, though she knows Judith's words are more for her own benefit than Clara's. It doesn't change the reality of the situation. It doesn't change the fact that the village is now filled with suspicion and fear. "I know they're scared," Clara murmurs. "But I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to make it better." Judith looks at her with soft eyes, a sadness in them that mirrors Clara's own. "You can't fix this, Clara. Not for them. But you can keep going. You can keep doing the work you've always done. For the people who still believe in you. For the ones who need you." Clara wants to say something to thank Judith, to tell her that she's right. But the words catch in her throat. All she feels is the crushing weight of what's happened, the knowledge that the loss is too great to overcome with simple words. The village won't understand. They'll see her as a failure, a woman who couldn't save them from the sickness that has now infected their lives. The silence between them stretches, but it isn't uncomfortable. It's the kind of silence that comes after grief, after realization. There are no answers, no solutions. Just the quiet understanding that life-death moves on, whether you're ready for it or not. "I don't know if I can go back to that house," Judith Clara says, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can face them. I don't know if I can face myself." Judith's gaze softens and she pulls Clara into an unexpected hug. "You don't have to do it alone," she says gently, holding her for a moment longer than Clara expects. "We're all in this together. The village may be divided now, but it will heal. And when it does, you'll still be here. You'll still be the midwife who has seen more than most, who's given more than most." Clara feels her eyes well with tears, though she quickly blinks them away, refusing to let herself break down in front of anyone, even Judith. The tears are for the baby, for Eleanor, for the villagers who will never see what she did. She wonders if in time she will ever feel the peace she longs for, or if this emptiness will follow her forever. "I'll try," Clara says quietly. "I'll try." Judith nods and steps back, a look of quiet encouragement on her face. That's all you can do. Try. And then take a step forward. Every day. Even if it's just one step at a time. Clara watches as Judith turns to leave the weight of her words lingering in the air. The village will never forget the deaths. They'll never forget what happened to Eleanor and the child. But maybe, just maybe, with time they'll understand that Clara did what she could. She did everything she could. As the morning sun rises higher, Clara feels the first stirrings of something inside her, a small spark of hope, of resolve. She doesn't know what the future holds. She doesn't know what the village will say when the news spreads. But she knows one thing: she will keep going. For herself, for the memory of those she couldn't save, and for the hope that one day the weight of this tragedy will ease. But that day isn't today. Today, Clara takes a deep breath and turns back toward the village, ready to face whatever comes next. With the weight of the past on her shoulders and the uncertainty of the future before her, she walks forward step by step into the unknown. The village feels different now. It's no longer the place where Clara once found comfort, where her work as a midwife was both a calling and a connection to the community. Now, as she walks down the same cobblestone streets, everything seems distant. Familiar faces turn away when they see her, and the voices that once greeted her with warmth are now filled with suspicion. The town is alive with the hum of everyday life, but Clara feels disconnected like a ghost, moving through a place that no longer feels like home. She walks slowly, trying not to make eye contact with the villagers she passes. Their expressions are unreadable, but the tension in the air is undeniable. It's only been a few hours since the whispers began, but they've already spread like wildfire. The death of Eleanor and her baby has shaken the village to its core. The fear of disease is palpable, and Clara knows they need someone to blame someone to hold responsible for the loss of 2 lives. And who better to blame than the one person who was supposed to protect them from death, her? Clara's stomach tightens as she passes the bakery, the scent of fresh bread filling the air. It's a smell she used to find comforting, but now it only adds to the feeling of disconnection. She's not a part of this world anymore, not in the way she once was. Her heart aches for the community she thought she belonged to, for the villagers who once trusted her. But now they view her with suspicion, with fear. Clara, a voice calls from behind her. She doesn't need to turn around to know who it is. It's Judith, her closest friend in the village. Clara pauses, waiting for her to catch up. When Judith reaches her, she doesn't say anything at first. The silence stretches between them, filled with the unspoken words Clara knows they're both thinking. Finally, Judith speaks, her voice quiet but firm. "I'm sorry," she says. "I know how hard this is for you. But you don't have to face this alone." Clara looks at Judith, her heart heavy. She wants to speak, to say something in response, but her throat feels tight, like she swallowed a lump of stone. Judith's concern, her kindness, is a balm, but it doesn't heal the wound that has opened up between Clara and the village. It doesn't change the fact that Clara is a scapegoat, now an outsider in the place she once called home. "I don't know what to do," Judith Clara admits, her voice barely above a whisper. "The village, they're blaming me. They think I didn't do enough. And maybe they're right. Maybe I didn't. Maybe if I had acted sooner, if I had known more, I could have saved them." Judith shakes her head. "Clara, you did everything you could. No one could have stopped this. But you can't carry this guilt. You can't carry it alone." Clara presses her lips together, trying to hold back the tears that threaten to spill over. The guilt is suffocating, and it doesn't help that the village is already starting to turn against her. She can feel their eyes on her, watching her every move, waiting for her to slip, waiting for her to fail. "I don't know how to make them understand," Clara says, her voice shaking. "I don't know how to make them see that it wasn't my fault." "You can't make them understand," Judith says gently. "But you don't need their approval. You don't need to be their savior. You just need to keep going. For yourself. For the ones who still believe in you." Clara feels the weight of Judith's words, and for a moment she almost believes them. Almost. But the fear still lingers, a constant presence at the back of her mind. She's always been the one people turn to for help, for guidance. And now they're turning away. She can feel it in the way they speak about her behind closed doors, in the hushed tones, the way they avoid her gaze when she enters the room. It's as if she's become a symbol of failure, and she can't escape it. "I don't know how to go on," Clara admits, her voice breaking. "I feel like I'm being suffocated by all of it. The guilt, the blame, the shame." Judith places a hand on Clara's shoulder, her grip firm and reassuring. "One step at a time, Clara. One step at a time. You don't have to have all the answers right now. You don't have to fix everything. You just need to keep going. And when you're ready, when you've found the strength, you'll face them. you'll face the village. Clara looks up at Judith, her heart heavy with gratitude and pain. She's not sure if she believes she can do what Judith is suggesting, but for the first time in what feels like forever, she feels a small flicker of hope. She can keep going. She has to. For herself, for the memory of Eleanor and her child, for the future of the village. But it will take time. Time to rebuild. Time to heal. Time to find the strength to face what comes next. As the two women stand together in the village square, Clara knows the road ahead will be long filled with challenges and hardships. But she also knows that she isn't alone. Judith is right. She doesn't need the approval of the village. She needs only the strength to move forward. And maybe, just maybe, the village will come to see the truth that she did all she could. That she wasn't the one to blame. But for now, Clara takes a deep breath, her eyes steady on the path ahead. She's ready to take the first step. And though it may be painful, though it may be slow, she knows she can't stop. Not yet. The days drag on, and the weight of the village's judgment presses harder with each passing hour. Clara goes through the motions, preparing the few herbs she can gather, helping the women who are still willing to come to her, tending to the sick, who trust her enough to walk through her door. But every smile feels forced. Every glance she receives carries the sting of suspicion. She knows they're still whispering about her behind closed doors. The pain of their judgment is becoming a constant companion, always with her, always pulling at her. She thinks back to the first few years when she started working as a midwife. When the community's trust was given to her freely, when women came to her for advice, for comfort. She remembers the quiet gratitude in their eyes. After every birth, the warmth of their hands clasped around hers, the soft words of thanks whispered under breath as their babies took their first cries. She never imagined a day would come when she would stand on the opposite side of the trust, with every decision she made questioned, scrutinized, and doubted. But this is her reality now. This is the cost of being a midwife in a small village, where the line between life and death is thin, and blame comes swiftly when tragedy strikes. One morning, as Clara walks through the village on her way to the market, she feels the familiar eyes of the townsfolk on her. The looks aren't as harsh as they were the first few days, but they're still there, those brief moments when someone looks her way and quickly looks away, or when a quiet murmur erupts behind her back. It's all she can do to keep her composure, to push through it and continue walking. But it's harder every day. As she enters the market square, she catches sight of a familiar face. Lisa, the blacksmith's wife. Lisa was one of the first women Clara helped when she arrived in the village. She was a stubborn one, refusing to believe Clara's remedies would work, but in the end, it was Clara who delivered her second child, and they had formed an unspoken bond of trust since. Now as Liza spots Clara, her face falters. It's brief, a split second, but Clara sees it. Lisa's eyes flit to her for just a moment, before she quickly turns away. Clara's heart sinks, but she pushes the feeling aside. There is no time for self-pity, no time for dwelling on the judgments of others. Not now. She continues on her way, collecting what few supplies she needs from the market. Dried herbs, cloth, some simple food to carry her through the coming days. The work is steady, but Clara's thoughts are elsewhere. As she's walking back, a sudden, unexpected thought grips her. What if I leave? The thought surprises her, but it doesn't feel entirely alien. The village has turned its back on her. She has become a pariah, an outcast, the one to blame for the deaths that shook them to their core. She doesn't belong here anymore. Maybe she could leave. Go somewhere else, somewhere far from the whispers, far from the judgment. Start fresh. But then the reality sets in. Where would she go? Who would take her in? And what of the women who still need her? She has never been one to run from responsibility, and abandoning the village now would be a betrayal. The thought fades, but it lingers at the edges of her mind, like a shadow that refuses to leave. As she nears her cottage, the familiar shape of the building ahead feels cold. The wind picks up, ruffling her hair, and Clara pulls her shawl tighter around her shoulders. She pauses at the threshold, her hand hovering over the door handle. For the first time in days, she feels a stirring of something deeper resolve. She has made mistakes. She has failed. But she is not done yet. The village may not believe in her anymore, but she can still help. She can still make a difference, even if it's just for the women who need her now. Even if it's just for the ones who haven't turned their backs on her. She takes a deep breath, pushes the door open, and steps inside. The cottage is quiet, but not empty. It's still hers, still a space where she has helped bring life into the world, where she has fought against death, often to no avail. But she's not giving up. Not yet. That night, Clara sits by the hearth, staring into the fire, the flames dancing in front of her. She feels the flicker of warmth in the room, but it's not enough to dispel the chill in her bones. She thinks about the villagers, about the ones who still blame her, about the ones who have lost faith. But then her thoughts drift to something else. Something she hasn't allowed herself to fully think about until now. The truth. Clara knows that she did everything she could for Eleanor. She knows that the sickness was beyond anyone's control. She can't change what happened, but she can accept it. The guilt that has weighed so heavily on her heart for days is not hers to carry alone. She was not the one who brought the disease. She was not the one who caused the deaths. She was a healer, not a miracle worker. She did her best, and that is all she can offer. Historians argue whether midwives should have carried the burden of responsibility for their villages, whether they were seen as symbols of hope or just as figures to blame when things went wrong. Clara knows now that it's not her fault. It never was. The blame belongs to fate, to disease, to the forces beyond anyone's control. But as the days pass, Clara also realizes that she must find a way to forgive herself. The village may not forgive her, but she can forgive herself. She can move forward step by step despite the judgment and the whispers. She will rebuild what has been broken, slowly, carefully, but she will rebuild. The next few days pass in a blur. Clara rises each morning, her body aching from the weight of what she carries both physically and emotionally. The village remains unchanged in its coldness toward her, but she pushes forward. There's no point in retreating into isolation, though. Part of her wants to. The pain of being an outcast gnaws at her, and it would be so easy to lock herself away in her cottage, away from their accusing eyes. But she can't. There's work to be done. There are lives to care for, even if it's only the few who still trust her. The days are long and hard. The villagers, though wary, still come to her when they need help. She tends to their wounds, their ailments, offers the same guidance she always has, though now it's done under the weight of scrutiny. She tries not to let it show, tries not to let them see the exhaustion and grief that weigh heavily on her soul. But each word she speaks, each patient she helps, feels like an act of defiance. Not against the villagers, but against the guilt that has consumed her. At night, Clara sits by the hearth, tending to the fire. The embers glow warmly, but they can't chase away the chill that settles in her bones. Her thoughts are always there, swirling. Eleanor's death, the baby, the sickness that swept through the village, taking both of them. Clara had spent so many years trying to prevent this, trying to hold back the inevitable. But in the end, it came for them all, and she couldn't stop it. She doesn't know how to make peace with that. She doesn't know how to make peace with the fact that she's the one they blame, the one they turn to when tragedy strikes. The whispers from the village continue to reach her even when she tries to block them out. She failed, they say. She couldn't save them. The words sting, but Clara knows there's no escaping them. And then, one evening, as she walks back from the market, she feels a shift. It's subtle at first, a quiet conversation among a group of women. They stop when they see her, but the awkwardness in the air is palpable. She turns to leave, but then one of them, Ruth, calls after her. Clara, Ruth says, her voice hesitant. Clara stops, unsure whether she should turn around, unsure what Ruth wants. Ruth steps closer, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. I just wanted to say thank you. Clara blinks, her heart tightening. Thank you for what? For everything, Ruth says softly, glancing over her shoulder at the others who are now standing at a distance, watching the exchange. For helping me when my baby was born sick. For teaching me things no one else knew. I know you tried your best. And I just wanted to make sure you knew that not everyone thinks what they say. Clara's breath catches in her throat, and for a moment she can't speak. It feels like a small ray of light, an unexpected kindness in a world that has felt so cold. You really believe that, she asks, her voice barely a whisper. Ruth nods. Of course. You did everything you could. You've always been there for us. Don't let them take that from you. Clara feels a lump form in her throat. The tears that have been threatening to spill for days finally break free, though she doesn't allow them to fall. Thank you, Ruth, she says softly. Thank you for reminding me. Ruth smiles, her expression warm. Don't let them take away who you are, Clara. You're more than what happened. You've saved so many. Don't forget that. As Ruth turns to walk back to the others, Clara stands there for a long moment, staring after her. The weight that has been pressing on her chest lightens just a little. It's not much, but it's enough to make her breathe a little easier. It's enough to remind her that there are still people who believe in her, who know the truth. Maybe not everyone has forgotten her worth. That night, Clara lies in bed, staring at the ceiling. The fire has burned down to a low glow, casting faint shadows on the walls. She thinks about Ruth's words, about the kindness that still exists in this village, hidden beneath the layers of fear and judgment. And she feels a flicker of hope. It's a small thing, but it's there like a spark waiting to grow into something more. Historians often talk about the resilience of women like Clara, how they bore the weight of their responsibilities with strength, even when the world around them didn't seem to understand. Clara has never thought of herself as strong, never thought of herself as anything other than a healer, someone who did what was necessary. But tonight, she realizes that she has been stronger than she ever gave herself credit for. She's made it through the worst of the storm, and though the road ahead is still filled with challenges, she knows she can face it. She will face it. There is more work to be done, more lives to save, more hearts to heal. And Clara will not let the judgment of others define her. She will rebuild what she can, one small step at a time. For the first time in days, Clara closes her eyes and allows herself to rest. She doesn't know what tomorrow will bring, but she knows she can keep going. And that for now is enough. The days grow longer, the sun rising earlier with each passing morning. But for Clara, the passage of time is both a burden and a relief. The villagers, though still distant, are starting to accept her presence once more, however reluctantly. The whispers haven't disappeared, but they've softened the sharpness of their judgment, dulled by the passage of time. And though Clara still feels the sting of their silence, she knows that it will take time for the village to heal, for the wounds they've all endured to begin to close. In the quiet moments when the sun sets and the village is wrapped in the stillness of night, Clara finds herself reflecting on everything that has happened: the disease, the loss, the guilt. But it's the quiet moments of reflection that allow her to move forward. Slowly, painfully, but steadily. She has learned to live with the weight of what's happened, and while it may never fully lift, she's starting to realize that it doesn't have to define her. The guilt will always be there, but it doesn't have to consume her. One afternoon, as she walks through the village, Clara sees a familiar face, the widow Annabelle, who had come to her for help many times in the past. Annabelle's face is drawn with sorrow, her shoulders hunched, as if the weight of the world is pressing down on her. But when she sees Clara, her expression softens, and she steps toward her with a hesitant smile. Clara, Annabelle says quietly, almost as if speaking her name out loud feels strange after all this time. I wanted to thank you. Clara raises an eyebrow, unsure of what Annabelle means. Thank me. Annabelle nods, her voice steady, but her eyes full of gratitude. For everything you did for me. When my husband was sick and when I gave birth to little Thomas, you helped me. You never gave up on me, even when others did. I don't think I ever properly thanked you for that. Clara is taken aback by her words, the weight of them settling deep within her chest. She opens her mouth, but no words come out. There's a lump in her throat, the emotional toll of the past few weeks catching up to her all at once. She feels the sting of tears threatening to surface, but she blinks them away. Instead, she simply nods, her voice tight, as she says, "You don't need to thank me, Annabelle. I was only doing my job." Annabelle shakes her head, her eyes welling with emotion. No, Clara. You were more than just a midwife to me. You were a friend. You were there when I had no one else, and you gave me hope. When so many others turned their backs, you didn't. And that means everything. Clara looks at Annabelle, her heart heavy with emotion. The words feel like a salve to her soul, soothing the wounds that have been so raw for so long. She's been so focused on the pain, on the guilt, that she hasn't allowed herself to see the impact she's had on the lives of the people she's cared for. And now, in this quiet moment, surrounded by the weight of all that has happened, Clara realizes that despite everything, she is still needed. She is still valuable. The guilt, the shame, it will never fully go away. But this is what she clings to. The lives she's touched, the people she's helped. This is her legacy, not the deaths, not the blame, not the mistakes. This is what she must hold on to. I'm glad I could help, Clara says quietly, her voice filled with more warmth than she's allowed herself in weeks. I'm glad you're well, Annabelle. Annabelle smiles softly, her eyes filled with gratitude. I wouldn't be here without you. I'll never forget that. With those words, Clara feels something shift within her. It's not a complete healing, not a perfect closure, but it's a step. A small, quiet step toward accepting what she's been through and toward forgiving herself for the things she couldn't control. As Annabelle walks away, Clara stands there for a moment watching her go. The sun is beginning to set, casting a warm, golden light across the village. The shadows are long, but the light is still there, soft and steady. Clara takes a deep breath, allowing herself to feel the warmth of it. The warmth of the village, of the lives she's helped, of the small victories she has yet to fully appreciate. The road ahead is still long, but for the first time in a while, she feels like she's walking it with purpose. The whispers may never fully stop. The judgment may never fully fade. But Clara knows deep down that she's done enough. She has helped. She has loved. And in the end, that is what matters. As the sky darkens and the first stars begin to twinkle above, Clara heads back to her cottage, her heart a little lighter, her steps a little steadier. She doesn't know what tomorrow will bring, but she knows she will face it. Because no matter what, she has not given up yet. And as long as she has breath, she will continue to fight for the lives she has the power to change. The days that follow are quiet, though not without their own weight. Clara finds herself moving through life with a renewed sense of purpose, though the shadows of the past still linger. The villagers continue to whisper, but the sting of their judgment no longer consumes her. She goes about her work delivering children, tending to the sick, and offering what little comfort she can to those who need it. And with each passing day, she begins to feel something she hasn't felt in a long time. A sense of peace, a quiet acceptance of her place in the world. The road to forgiveness, both from the village and herself, is long. It is filled with setbacks, with moments where Clara feels herself slipping back into the suffocating grip of guilt and self-doubt. But then there are moments small but meaningful, when someone looks at her with trust, with gratitude, and the weight begins to lift. She begins to see that there is more to her work than the deaths she couldn't prevent. There is still life to be brought into the world, and she is still the one they turn to for help, for guidance, for hope. One afternoon, as Clara is walking through the village, she notices a small group of children playing near the well. One of them, a little girl with bright red braids, looks up and catches Clara's gaze. The child smiles, running over to her with a look of innocent joy. "Clara," she calls out, her voice high with excitement. "You helped my mother, didn't you? You made her better." Clara pauses, surprised by the child's words. The mother in question had been gravely ill only a few months ago, bedridden with a fever that had seemed fatal. Clara had treated her with herbs, keeping her cool, and with time the woman had recovered, her strength returning. Clara smiles softly, kneeling down to the girl's level. "Yes," she says gently, "I helped your mother. But it was your mother who fought the hardest, you know. She was very brave." The little girl nods seriously, her bright eyes wide with admiration. "I'm glad you helped her," she says, her voice filled with such sincerity that Clara feels a pang in her chest. This child, so full of life and hope, doesn't care about the whispers, doesn't care about the guilt that still lingers in Clara's heart. She only sees Clara for what she is, a healer, a protector. "Thank you for trusting me," Clara says quietly, her voice thick with emotion. The child smiles once more before running back to join her friends who are playing in the dirt. Clara watches her go, the heaviness in her chest slowly lifting with each step that the girl takes away. It's moments like these that remind her of why she does what she does. It's not for the accolades, the recognition, or even for the village's approval. It's for the people who need her, for the lives she can still touch, however small. The following weeks are filled with moments of quiet healing. The village, though still wary, begins to warm to Clara again. The whispers grow softer, replaced by quiet nods of appreciation, by small acts of kindness, like the woman who comes to her with a small loaf of bread, or the farmer who stops to thank her for her work in delivering his child. It's not a complete reconciliation, but it's enough for Clara to feel like she's no longer drowning in the weight of the village's judgment. They're still watching, still unsure, but they're beginning to see her for who she truly is, a woman who has dedicated her life to helping others, even when it has cost her everything. One evening, after a long day, Clara sits outside her cottage, the sun just dipping below the horizon. The air is cool and the sky is painted in hues of pink and orange. She's alone, but for the first time in weeks, she feels a sense of contentment, a sense of peace. The village still has its flaws, and there are still wounds to heal within herself and within the community. But for now, Clara is content. She has done what she could, and she has learned to accept what she cannot change. The fire crackles softly in the hearth inside, and Clara takes a deep breath, inhaling the cool evening air. The world feels still, and in this moment she feels as though she has earned a small reprieve. The road ahead will still be long, but she's not afraid of it anymore. She's ready to face whatever comes next, not because she has all the answers, but because she knows she's done her best. And sometimes that's all anyone can do. Clara stands gazing out at the village. She's spent so many years in the village that has both shaped her and judged her. She doesn't know what the future holds, but she knows that she'll continue to walk it step by step. For herself, for the ones who still need her, and for the ones who may never understand. And with that quiet thought, Clara turns and steps back inside her cottage, ready for whatever tomorrow brings. The journey isn't over. It never truly is. But for tonight, she has found a moment of peace.